Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review season 3. Well, half of season 3. Because it is 45 plus episodes. So, reasonably, when looking at that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not. I'm just not gonna try to review 45 plus episodes in one review. That would take far too long. It would be a great way to approach it. It would probably have to be like, hey, what were my best episodes out of that 45 branch of season? And ultimately, that honestly would probably be still kind of pretty easy, to be brutally honest. It probably would have been pretty easy. Going into the first two seasons a tiny bit, remembering them, knowing that a bulk of the time, reasonably within those first two seasons, it was basically the most interesting episodes were the episodes that would showcase how characters became to be. You would get to ultimately see how Bebop and Rocksteady became a thing. You would understand how eventually in season 2 how Baxter became a fly. And bizarrely, looking back on that now, that episode had something to do with the World Trade Center, which I thought was bizarre. And we kind of got like the origin stories of certain characters and who they are and stuff like that. The first ever real appearance of April O'Neil and this and that. So in season 3, going into season 3, if I'm to be brutally honest about season 3, there's a lot of clunkers in this season. There's a boatload of clunkers in this season. Reasonably, I think the best episodes are the episodes where they're showcasing some new character, because everything else is from the first half of this season. A lot of it is all just what I would call a gimmick episode, where it's just like, well, hey, once you figure out what the episode is about, a lot of the times it kind of becomes a mood point, just because it's like, yeah, I really don't care about this episode. It's a lot of I could care less episodes, which is sad. But I think reasonably when you see the big volume of this season, and like reasonably there was some episodes in the very first and second seasons that were kind of lackluster as well. So knowing full well that they're just pounding these episodes out like it's nobody's business, reasonably it's just kind of like, okay, well, we're going to go to the oldest trick in the book, and every episode has to be some kind of gimmick like episode. Like, look at Smallville. Like, there was so many Smallville like episodes where it would just be like, okay, let's have an entire episode about about Lionel Luthor and Clark Kent trading bodies. Let's have an entire episode of Clark Kent going to an alternate dimension. Let's have an entire episode about that. Kind of when looking into like Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, like when going through those entire season episodes, I never got old with, like, those episodes never got old. Going through the real Ghostbusters, because every single episode going through the entire series was honestly very refreshing, just because there was never, I think, a real clunker episode where it's just like, oh my god, this is like a gimmick episode. Yeah, they did get to the point to where I think in the very later seasons where they focused too heavily on Slimer to it becoming like Woody Woodpecker-esh, or kind of like hey, this is the Slimer show. I'm like, no. Like, how about we not have Slimer be a big thing about the show? I think that's what probably killed the show, was just like it became like a Looney Tunes episode, and it kind of forgot what it kind kind of made itself. And plus it was just like, you know what, I think we want to end the show, so let's figure out a way to really get people to have disinterest in the show. And like that's what they're doing. They're trying to do like something easier, because the episodes I think were very difficult, and they were just like, you know what, I think we're kind of done with the show, so drive it in the ground by having it's the adventures of Slimer and friends. It was like that's when the show kind of got dumb. But for a bulk of how many numerous seasons they had, pretty dang good for bulk of it, until it transitioned to like, yeah, we just want to not do this anymore. And so they went into obscurity. But anyways, so going into these episodes, very much a lot of clunkers, very much a ton of just like a very like, you could really see that this episode was like the tradition for every single, not only show, like it seems like every superhero show, not only this one but like every single one that would follow would do the same kind of formula. Would, like, to the point of like Smallville, like I said, like a live action thing basically got to the point where like the overall show did the exact same thing, where it's just like, man, uh these are really just kind of clunker like shows. But I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like, man, did they really do some real clunker shows in this season? Some really just like, man, we couldn't, like, looking at like the next mutation, or looking at kind of the later stuff that happened down the road. Like, I think it's pretty easy for every episode to just introduce some sewer villain, or ultimately kind of change the approach of Shredder, and change the approach of the Foot, and change the approach of even where the Ninja Turtles are located at. You could have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the entire time actually being put in Japan, and like, or you could even have a Japan time period piece, which is not which is not at all going to be like the third movie that we got of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, which was garbage. Um, but yeah, a you could have had them like in Japan, and like you could go with that, and it not be like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. But anyways, going into this show, I think that probably the only episodes that I really liked were episodes where they premiered somebody or brought somebody back. Other than that, there's a lot of me like wanting to watch every episode, but realizing how every episode was, and I was like, God, is something else on, kind of thing, which was sad to approach this season. Was just like, could I just skip this episode, because what is the point? And plus, it seems like every episode, honestly, it begins and ends the same way. So it's not like you're like, if you skipped an episode, it doesn't seem to matter. There's not much of an introduction after the early seasons, after you get to know who's involved in a lot of this show. It kind of gets to the point where you can almost kind of start skipping episodes, because reasonably, they don't, besides like certain premieres of certain characters, they don't like continue to add characters. They don't continue to, uh, besides every once in a while you would get like a, oh, this guy came back in this episode, oh, this person came back in this episode. Yeah, not not a boatload of real, like, I desperately need to watch some of these episodes, which was sad to say ultimately, but I'm being honest. So yeah, with the exception of desperately just ultimately waiting for Casey Jones to ultimately show up within the season to get the first real premiere of Casey Jones coming into the show. Immediately, I was just like, "That's Casey Jones. That's Casey Jones. All right." Like there's like, if you watched Casey Jones on the show on mute, you would just be like, "Man, Casey Jones is awesome." Then immediately when you'd hear that voice, immediately you just like, yeah, all right. All right, okay. Sounds very Clint Eastwood like. Sounds very like they're ultimately they were trying to say that he should have like a Dirty Harry esque like voice, which doesn't make sense for a doesn't make sense for the role that this person should be. Maybe the way Athlete sounded was just like that, but I don't know. During that time period, but you would have thought you would have given this guy, should have given this guy like some kind of accent or not Clint Eastwood. Sounds like Clint Eastwood, or no, even better. He sounds like Jim Carrey when Jim Carrey would do these skits on In Living Color, where he would play this like this kind of Conan the Barbarian but female looking like character, and he would sound like this. It's like, and I'm just like, okay, like this. All I'm thinking the entire time is that Jim Carrey character that he played in Living Color, where he would just be this um, feminine brute character, and I'm thinking of that the whole time, and I'm just laughing at uncontrollably, because that's what keeps popping into my head. And then when this guy keeps talking, that's all I'm thinking about, and I couldn't stop it. So, but ultimately, knowing full well, I'm like, God, I want to see more episodes of Casey Jones, because man, I really liked Casey Jones. Like, I can kind of just get used to the voice, but yeah, there's some kind of goofy things even going on with Casey Jones in the very first episode that he's kind of premiering, where this guy is like, I like that he is stubbornly just going after anything, but in this episode, this looks like a guy that is just kind of like, well, going beyond Bed Bath and Beyond, his matchup. Like, this guy could like take on like everything, and to the point to where ultimately when there's one point in this episode that I thought was like, oh my god, this is actually kind of cool, because ultimately knowing full well like Casey Jones doing what he does in the episode that he premieres, I'm like, heck yeah! Because for me, I'm a guy that quasi is in the same ballpark of what happens in this episode, and I'll have to come to it when we come to it. But yeah, so there's a heck yeah moment in that episode, which I really I was like, yeah, like Casey Jones, yeah, I liked this. I liked like a moment in this episode, but yeah, it's like it's really yeah, but overall it's just like man, like he's like lawbreaker, I'm gonna come after you, lawbreaker. I'm gonna come after you and take you down. And then he mixes it up with the turtles, and yeah. So let's let's go into spoilers about this season so far. By and large, within this even spoiler like variation, it's going to be a lot of just me kind of going over like the best hits or the greatest hits overall. It's not going to be me going through every single detail of every episode. So in spoiler talk, if you're expecting that for me to go through like every aspect of every episode, ultimately these episodes are kind of too easy to need to take that kind of time, to be brutally honest. Like the best episodes that would be much more worth going into detail are the ones where someone premieres in it. Anything else, it's just like, okay, yeah, this is the same kind of episode that you've seen 100 times through hundreds of other shows. It's copy and paste, and it would be a waste to just take that time to go into, yeah, let's talk about a body swapping episode. Let's talk about the gimmick episodes that are just like filler episodes that are, and there's a lot of filler in this season. It feels like a season bulk of the time of filler, but you just gotta wait. Like ultimately, I would say it would be better off to not watch this season in its entirety. Just kind of really go for within season 3 what episodes are of when people premiere, when certain characters kind of premiere in each episode, when do certain characters return, and then kind of like kind of mosey down to figure out like what is the bigger of episodes. More than likely, you can probably just kind of go through and kind of read descriptions of certain episodes and just go, okay, this is gimmick episode, okay, this one, like, I'll actually watch. And then gimmick episode, hey, yeah, and yeah, so that's what this season really is. It's just read the descriptions of the episodes before really going into them. If ultimately you, at the end of the day, want to say that you want to find somewhere to watch this, because ultimately, again, for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, especially these early seasons, there's not exactly a way for you to say that you had saw them at some point. More than likely, go into some movie app thing somewhere, maybe like a movie box, or maybe I've been watching them on a Movie Pro app. You can probably watch it there. And by and large, just kind of find some bootleg app to watch this. If ultimately you don't want to actually go ahead and buy a actual like complete series of this or this and that and whatever and what have you. So at the end of the day, let's go into spoiling about this season, because yeah, I don't want to. I really just within these 20 some odd episodes, I don't want to go out of my way to go into full detail about certain episodes. I'm gonna kind of really as quickly as possible go through like the banner of just gimmick episodes that kind of all randomly approach of which I see or which I had seen in this season. And then ultimately, I'm going to spend a lot more time on, okay, I saw that this person showed up, so I'm going to talk about that episode because that episode seemed a lot more interesting. So, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again. You spoil this season so far. So, reasonably within these episodes, there are, again, they're all kind of very gimmicky episodes. Everything has to just be like the most soap opera like approach that you've ever kind of seen in your life. Like, there's one episode where and I'm probably going to kind of skip around through these 20 some odd episodes. Like, I'm not going to 100% just do them all in order. So if, like, hey, he's not talking about episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order. What the heck? No, I'm going to dance around because there's some episodes that are just go ahead and watch them all in order, or listen to this review and get the best of it all. So we have one episode where Splinter and Shredder switch bodies. Exciting, right? Not really. It's just like, okay, you have reasonably, like, Shredder being nice to Bebop and Rocksteady, and ultimately then Krang is noticing this, and ultimately he's like, well, how about we just scan your brain? And, like, Splinter, aka Shredder's like, oh no, I don't want to do that. So, and then reasonably, we have Splinter that is being very mean to the Turtles, and they're just like, man, he's really mean. Yeah. Eventually it gets to the point where because ultimately they had these machines that they stood on that ultimately switch their bodies. Guess what happens? They go into the same machine, switch their bodies back, and they're completely okie dokie. That's one of the episodes. Like, it's a lot of gimmick episodes. It's a lot of just episodes. So here's another episode. We have Shredder, which I actually thought this is actually a really funny episode. And again, not all these are in order. They aren't. So we have Shredder, who is basically playing as Mikey for a bulk of this entire episode, which I thought was funny because ultimately Shredder had put into this big, huge computer a hologram of Michelangelo. And so a hologram of Michelangelo comes out of the computer. And so it ends up that Shredder ends up getting shot with this laser from out of this computer. And so for the bulk of the rest of the episode, he ends up being Michelangelo. He's basically his brain is Michelangelo until someone calls him Shredder, and then all of a sudden he goes back into being Shredder, and then all of a sudden he's attacking people, attacking the turtles in the sewer, because ultimately Michelangelo knows where their lair is, so ultimately now Shredder knows where it is, so Shredder is going to the sewer and being Michelangelo until they call him Shredder, and then ultimately he pops out of being Michelangelo to be Shredder, and then beats up the turtles, but then they call him Michelangelo again, and then ultimately he's Michelangelo, and he's friends with everybody and this and that. This is probably a really fun episode and really funny episode to see, like, Shredder playing Michelangelo, the funny character. I actually liked this episode, and it kind of comes off way later in these 20 some odd episodes. But I thought that one was actually really fun. That one's actually really fun. That one was worth watching. There's a lot of shrinking episodes going on in this early portion of the season. We have it to where in one episode they shrink military bases, and then because there's some flying, like, a UFO saucer like thing that Krang invents that shrinks all of military bases, and they're hoping to kind of figure out a way to try and get the Technodrome out of the underground. So they're trying to come up with techniques to try to figure out how to get the Technodrome out of the underground and out and about. And so they end up bizarrely shrinking military bases, and then they think, oh, well, hey, we should probably try to shrink the turtles. And surefire enough, reasonably that doesn't actually happen. And eventually, at some point, they drive the shrinking UFO thing down to the ground, and they crash it. The turtles do, and so yeah, it's kind of one of those episodes. And then eventually, there's another episode where, of course, you have a 100-foot tall Shredder, because of course, and besides the shrinking episode, now you have to make certain characters bigger. You have to make them 100 feet tall, because again, gimmick episodes. We ultimately at first have some beam-like device that ultimately makes Shredder 100-foot tall. So this is kind of like Ant-Man episodes, basically. It ends up accidentally happening. The same thing happens to Irma. Irma ends up becoming 100-foot tall, and then eventually she has to take this giant aspirin-like pill. So this is kind of like the Dinosaur Neil Tick episode. If you guys have ever seen the show The Tick, I just saw the first season recently, and it kind of feels like like this episode. So Irma, bizarrely, like, she couldn't take this pill. Ultimately, she only would take pills if they were mixed into her ice cream. So bizarrely, Michelangelo takes an entire thing of ice cream, like an entire like thing of, yeah, a big boatload of ice cream, chucks it into some cement mixer, and so this girl is drinking ice cream out of a cement mixer, which I'm like, did they clean that cement mixer? Is she drinking cement ice cream? What's going on here? I'm confused. Hopefully they cleaned out that cement mixer, I hope. But that's one of the episodes. We have a tour in one of these episodes. April O'Neil gets a new makeover for this episode and this episode alone. Just to go to some ball somewhere, and it ends up that this ball is actually a costume ball. And then so what ends up happening is that there's also this princess at this ball it's like royalty, and April and this princess get confused for one another. And so when April is starting to go to this party, ultimately the guys that are working there are like, oh my god, princess, what are you doing out here? And ushers her in, gives her the princess treatment. And then so April goes in and starts putting on royalty costumes, and then it's like, well, I guess I should get some mileage out of this. And the girl that plays April actually, I think, is the voice of April. So it's kind of funny. Within this season, like, I could start to see more that there's a lot more times where I think people were either sick or just wouldn't be in episodes. You can hear that Krang is sounding differently compared to the early seasons, and you could kind of hear at some points like Raph not sounding like Raph, or Donnie not sounding like Donnie, or any number of certain characters at some point sounding different, which I thought was kind of funny. Like, you would think within this show, like, you would have thought that when watching like the real Ghostbusters, like, it seems like they would probably normally have like one guy who could do the voice for anybody if anybody were sick. Um, but I guess for them, they would just be like, yeah, yeah, we're just going to try to just whoever. If anybody wants to do their Wrath version today, knock themselves out. Uh, yeah. So, anyways, April ends up getting stolen away by Bebop and Rocksteady and the Shredder, and ultimately, because they think that she's the princess, and ultimately the royalty people think that she's the princess, and so ultimately Shredder's holding her hostage, but then ultimately the real princess shows up in a very much Natalie Portman Star Wars like way. Is ultimately like, hey, we gotta rescue this April O'Neil woman, and so yeah, very much ends up being that basically like the turtles take down Shredder and Bebop and Rocksteady and get April back because what are they gonna do? Are they gonna is she gonna get killed by Bebop and Rocksteady and Shredder now? That's not how these episodes go. Every single episode has to always like it's bottled within itself. 90% of the time. The only time it isn't bottled within itself is when a new character premieres, or and then that person like goes on for the entire time. But every other time, it's bottlenecked within itself. There's bizarre-ish episodes where you have like this entire gimmick of, hey guys, let's do dinosaurs. And so reasonably, like there is a dinosaur that just appears in New York City. The turtles are just like, man, we're seeing a lot of like, is there an earthquake going on in New York? What's going on? There's a, like they think it's the Technodrome. They go out and see for themselves because these guys like to be in incognito. I really like the incognito moments where you have them transition into turtles. So like it's getting a lot more funner in this season compared to the previous ones where they would just show up and they're like, yeah, we don't know any better. Like it's great to see the incognito spots. So, but a lot of times in other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you would just see them all the times, just like on rooftops. You would just see them kind of like jumping from building to building, which is kind of like the Tick in a lot of ways. I think they ended up just stealing that from the Tick, because yeah, like the I think maybe like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the show The Tick probably steal a lot of stuff from one another. It's just like, oh yeah, like hey, we're just gonna have the turtles like jump from rooftop to rooftop instead of having them to like just just walk through the streets. Just like, yeah, we don't know any better. So that way, ultimately, I don't have to wear disguises like all the time. But anyways, there's an entire episode about a dinosaur that shows up, but then it just ends up being like bizarrely like Jurassic Park in New York for some odd reason. And so it ends up being that the Technodrome ends up coming back to the surface, and so you have these dinosaurs that are all like banging on this door of the Technodrome for the guys to come in, because ultimately they have, again, who do you think? April's in the Technodrome. Um, yeah, whole entire episode about dinosaurs. There's also another entire episode about like a mutated bull or something like that, which I'm like, why? Why in this show? Why? Why do we have these things? Because we can. There's entire episodes about weather. There's entire episodes about weather. There's like at one point in the beginning of the episode, the the environment is too hot, and then so the turtles go down in the sewers, and then the sewer is too cold, and so they're like, God, like, man, we go up to the surface, it's too hot. We go down to the sewer, it's too cold, and we're just like we're dying out here. And so, and then there's also like an entire episode where, like, basically, New York City turns into like the North Pole. Like, it's just a complete snow area, and eventually they fight a polar bear, but they end up finding that they, like, the reason why they are fighting a polar bear is because they ended up being, not even realizing it, ending up being in a zoo. And that's when Leonardo, he ends up leaving because he can't trust his decisions that he's making, so he just leaves the team for reasons. Because I'm like, dude, he just comes back in the end of the episode, and he's just like, well, I guess, yeah, I should probably just stay and be the leader, I guess. Like, he went on a walkabout, I guess, but he didn't really come to any consensuses. He didn't really, like he gave up believing in himself, and then I guess he's like, well, I guess I should just believe in myself now because I kind of have to, because if I don't, all the other turtles, like, it seems like out of all the other turtles, I think Mikey, if Leonardo leaves, is probably the best leader. Raph, like, tends to give up as leader, and then Donnie, like, takes a million years and, like, busts out like 35 equations to know exactly where to go somewhere. And so I think Michelangelo is probably the best leader out of everybody. If Leonardo is not the leader, Mikey needs to be the leader because Mikey is the best leader. It seemed like a bulk of his plans were working, and then Leonardo came back, threw a sword at this robot thing that was protecting this building, and, like, again, so Michelangelo, if Leonardo leaves, Michelangelo is the best leader, I think. Like, uh, Raph would always just ask others what to do, and so that's not really leading. Uh, Reasonably, Donnie took 12 hours to and busted out equations. Michelangelo was just like, yeah, man, let's do this. And yeah, bulk of the time it seemed to work. It was actually working. So yeah, Michelangelo, second best leader in one episode that I had seen. We've narrowed that down now. So, plus there's an entire episode about gravity. There's a gimmick episode entirely about gravity, how all of a sudden everybody is starting to, like, float in air. And so reasonably it gets to the point to where, bizarrely, Shredder concocted this anti-gravity device. And so it gets to the point to where Bebop and Rocksteady have these anti-gravity boots that keep them, like, down to the ground, and eventually the turtles try to steal those boots and use them for their own. And that's when we kind of get some foot interactions too, where ultimately I think Mikey takes down some of the foot members and ends up getting the boots. So yeah. Other than that, a lot of very much gimmick episodes. More than likely, somebody might be like, "What about this episode? What about that episode?" Yeah, just a lot of gimmick like episodes. There's certain episodes where you have I think that is still the Shredder being Michelangelo episode. within that one, like it was kind of funny that Michelangelo was getting hypnotized because he was eating too much pizza, and so reasonably. And there's also like episodes entirely about people's weight, bizarrely. How like Michelangelo's getting a little too big. So ultimately, Splinter hypnotizes him to stop doing pizza. So he's like, "I will eat pizza no more." And then eventually, all he does is go to a pizza shop, and then he takes 12 hours to not order anything but a soda. And then, because he's like, I will not eat pizza anymore. And so then eventually, towards the end of the episode, Splinter is just like, you know what? Like, I'm going to hypnotize him to just, like, say that he can eat pizza. Like, just give him what he wants. And so, like, and it's kind of funny because ultimately, within the episode where like the Gravity episode, like Michelangelo eats like as many things of pizza as he can because he's like, yeah, like I want to make sure that I'm firmly on the ground. It's like I've been feeling like I've been so weightless today, so like if anything, I want to make sure that I'm firmly on the ground. So he ate a lot of pizza, and then in that episode, um, like he was hypnotized to back again to eat pizza, which is kind of fun. Like Irma, where eventually she becomes the skyscraping Irma. Like for her, she was on a severe diet, and then she was consistently trying to break that diet. And April O'Neil was like, "No, your diet, your diet, Irma, stick with it. You can do it." And so eventually towards the end of the episode she like because ultimately it's her birthday on this episode, and so ultimately she just like she gives in to she gives into her she gives into just eating whatever towards the very end of the episode, and everybody's like, well, hey, your diet, and she's ultimately just like, you know what, I just lost 10,000 pounds today, like I'm gonna eat whatever I want. And then ultimately they're just like, hey, yeah, you go ahead. So yeah, they're like, let's talk about some of the like premiering characters. So ultimately, when playing this game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Madness, there was one character where I'm like, yeah, like I remember seeing this character, but I don't remember who he is. Let's talk about the episode Rat King, which was actually a really good episode. It actually made a lot of sense. So this Rat King character feels to me like kind of like a Pied Piper kind of character that ultimately had some kind of like very much hypnosis on the entire like rat species in this sewer. And so immediately uh, this Rat King would just be singing along this little ditty, and the rats would just be doing whatever to the point to where a lot of people in the sewers were getting attacked by rats, and they're like, what the heck is going on? So eventually even Splinter was like coming under the control of this Rat King. He's like, I don't want to do it, but he's like I feel like I'm being like swayed somewhere, and like you'd have like this episode where the closer and closer Splinter would get to this Rat King, he was just like, I don't know what it is, but I'm getting so much pain, and so recently it would get to the point to where when Rat King was with Splinter, ultimately he completely swayed him to have Splinter attack his own sons, and so eventually it got to the point where like Splinter was like, "Oh my god, like I'm so sorry that I fought all of you. Like ultimately, like I'm so weak right now. Like ultimately, I don't think that I want to get anywhere close to this Rat King, um, because ultimately I know he's gonna sway me. So go and fight him." sons. So ultimately, they take him down, of course. But ultimately, like, they don't take him down in the sense that he, like, never shows up again. Like, he randomly shows up on some other episode to for the Rat King to help them find somebody, which I thought was just kind of a weird episode where, like, they had to take in a whole entire episode to find someone. I don't remember which person they had to do where they had to, like, find somebody, but they had to find somebody. I think it might have been probably any number of episodes where April was, like, kidnapped by somebody, because that's usually happens in, like, every bajillion episodes where she ends up getting kidnapped by somebody, and then that kidnapped person would and April would always lose her communication thing every single time. Like, it's like April, with having like a bajillion pockets in that yellow jumpsuit, man, does she lose the communicator like every single time coming out of that thing. Good grief, woman. There's also an entire episode of April's boss trying to get his groove back, like ultimately realizing that somebody tells him that he's an old, like, hey, like, you're old, like, you know what, if he wasn't so old, like, yeah, I'm sure he would whoop all you guys into figuring out who these Ninja Turtles really are. And so the boss goes, yeah, like, I can go and I can find out who these Ninja Turtles are. So bizarrely, this guy, like, goes in a very much old-fashioned looking reporter costume out there, and then eventually he goes to whisper to this, like, hooligan guy. You know, ultimately tells him, like, hey, you know anything about the Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And so this guy's like, what are you talking about? And so eventually they get into some hot water, but then eventually, somewhere down the narrow of this episode, these two reporters end up getting abducted by these cloned Elvises, and abducted, like, alien abducted with these cloned aliens, these cloned Elvises, not aliens but Elvises. And then ultimately, once they get dropped back down to Earth, the April's boss ends up reporting to the news about cloned Elvises that abduct people. I'm like, okay, sure. Just random, like, episodes going on in here at some points. So yeah, so we have the deduction of uh, Rat King. We ultimately have Baxter the Fly coming back, ultimately as a bizarre, I think, ghost through some of this episode. And I was just like, okay. Like, the way they kind of do his origin, like how he kind of appears in season 2, ultimately kind of feels like the Fly approach to me, and like Jeff Goldblum Fly, like, where ultimately he gets kind of stuck in this room and he's like, oh, what's gonna go on, and then he ends up just turning into a big huge fly monster. And that's how he ultimately, and the entire episode, like, at first bizarrely ties in the World Trade Center, which is weird. So in this episode, he comes back, and he is just this, like, seemingly ghost-like character that is just, like, clinging on to try to get revenge. And every time he talks, people are like, "Did you hear something? Did you?" So an entire episode of that, and then Shredder eventually finds, like, the spirit of Baxter, and so he wants to, like, sucker him in to try to, like, get him to work for him again. Yeah, so God, what was the episode that I was also gonna think about and mention and say? Because I was thinking about Baxter, and I was talking about that. a lot of bizarre episodes. Yeah. So let's go into because we can go on forever about some of these bizarre gimmick like episodes, but that's all they are. A bulk of the time, it's mostly just gimmick episodes. We we have it to where let's talk about the Casey Jones episode, and then we'll kind of clear the air on any kind of other um, episodes. Like there was a love potion episode where ultimately all the turtles get this love potion episode, and they're all fighting over Irma, and then ultimately Rocksteady gets this same love potion, and he ends up falling for April O'Neil and is kidnapping her again because she gets kidnapped all the time. She's like the Velma from Scooby Doo. And I guess that's on purpose because red hair, or I think red hair. Maybe it's brown. I don't know. Even though I just saw Teenage Mutant Turtles, heaven forbid I really know exactly what hair April O'Neil has. So yeah, you have an entire episode about that where ultimately Donatello has to come to the rescue of April, and but like Donnie has to come up with the antidote for the rest of his turtles to rescue them from their love potion fighting, and then cue Donnie and team going and rescuing April afterwards. So yeah, let's go into the Casey Jones episode, and then again we'll randomly bring up any kind of random episodes that just seemed bizarre to me. Going into any number of these, um, there was kind of a fun kind of tourist episode where there was some alien seemingly coming from out of nowhere, and bizarrely he would be having this camera thing that will ultimately be taking film or taking pictures. I don't know. It didn't really quite make sense to me. But whatever he would film ultimately would be sucked into this camera and the settings would be gone. Or ultimately the persons that he would be filming would be sucked into this camera and would be sucked in this camera and not be completely they had an entire episode about that. And then so ultimately there was too many things sucked in the camera to the point where ultimately April had the exact same identical camera as this guy. So what do you think happens? Shredder ends up trying to pick up the camera from the alien, but instead picks up April's camera and then tries to take it to show Krang, but ultimately it's like, oh, this was made in Taiwan. So ultimately, April has the alien's camera and accidentally, I think she sucks the turtles in, and then eventually Splinter goes into this editing bay of the Channel 6 news report thing, and eventually he breaks this editing thing, which shoots out the turtles. Bizarrely, water, like this entire. Like, I liked all of every, like, random setting that everybody went into in this camera or within this camera thing because ultimately you'd have like Shredder and all of everybody like Shredder and Bebop from Rocksteady and every like taking down the turtles in these interesting looking settings. But then eventually the turtles, because ultimately this entire episode was queued upon them finally wanting to vacation because all the turtles were burnt out. But then eventually, once they got out of this camera, they realized there's no place like home in a very Wizard of Oz like approach. So that is an entire episode about that. So I actually thought that was kind of fun, even though again was a very gimmick-like episode, and plus you'd have this silly alien character that was just, it's just, but anyways, because you normally when you would have like an introductory character that doesn't know any better, like I'm like, yeah, this character's gonna be really dumb. Sadly enough, it's always what happens. The very ignorant character that I don't know what I'm doing. It's like that's always those characters. Is just the like you would not get the person that's just like, yeah, I'm gonna try to take advantage of this and steal all of these settings and whatever. No, it's always like the I don't know any better character. That's always the character you would get, not the like yeah. Like we also had like a robot that came to them from the distant future. Why? Why robot come from distant future? Ultimately, this robot consistently time travels. Wow, what an episode that was! Just time traveling robot coming in here. Ultimately, like if you guys remember the movie Short Circuit, where it's Johnny Five, and he's like soup. Basically, I think they gigantically, basically ripped off that entire movie and then just did like that into like this episode. Like, I think with a lot of these episodes, I think they just ripped off a bunch of stuff. Just every episode had some kind of ripping off like thing of some movie somewhere. Where I think that's where they came up with a lot of these ideas. Where like, yeah, we want to do dinosaurs, or we want to do an entire episode about this because somebody was watching some movie somewhere and had an idea about that is the approach of where they went into. They stole a lot of stuff from a lot of movies, or they just stole a lot of stuff um, from probably other shows and episodes, and then they would kind of bring up exactly where they would they were to rip it off of. Funny enough, like numerously hearing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme within the show. Like it was funny at like some point where Michelangelo would look right at the screen and just be like, "Yeah, you guys must be really loving this music, huh?" Because how many freaking times are you gonna hear da 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 through like every single episode? Da 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 da. Every episode, it's a bulk of the time just that same song laced within the theme. It seems like they had very few theme things to go into, and like they had a very small like soundtrack list when going into like severely small going into this show. Like I know like the real Ghostbusters, they would probably have a limited track as well, but reasonably, every once in a while you just kind of get this random song that came in there, and they're like, yeah, yeah, I'm liking this. Like, this is really good for this episode. But yeah, so let's get into that Casey Jones episode and why I liked it at a good portion of it. So, Casey Jones. So this guy comes off as like trying to be like a Jason Voorhees like character, be that could actually talk, but this guy would consistently just be this like berserker guy that like I don't know, like he really didn't have any kind of really intelligence. Like it didn't really feel like he had a brain up there, and that he was just like, where's crime, kind of like that's like no noggin, no nothing. Like it feels like this Casey Jones was just like this guy like must have been knocked in the head way too many times. This Casey Jones, because this guy was just like, where's crime? You lawbreakers out there, I'm gonna go and get you. Like, and that's what his driving force was. It didn't matter how crazy the obstacle was. It didn't matter, like, everybody was just like, it got to the point where the Ninja Turtles were just like, yeah, go ahead, Casey. Like, go ahead and just beat the living crap out of whatever you're gonna do this episode. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sick 'em, boy. Because at some point, like, Casey Jones, like, just completely just knocked down this door, because a lot of the turtles were thinking, like, well, maybe we can come through a different location or something like that. No, Casey Jones just, like, knocks this door down. So bizarrely, this episode that Casey Jones is in, ultimately Shredder busts out all of these bugs that could control every single electronical device, to where it gets to the point to where it gets into the turtle's car, but ultimately it goes into a bunch of appliances, like, and we have just a bunch of appliances all going crazy, to where at some point Raph is fighting a toaster, bizarrely. At some point, like, the turtles are fighting off fridges and dishwashers and all kinds of different appliances. And the best part of this for me personally, because I have some personal tie to, because I was ultimately a person, before I came on YouTube and came on here. I was a person that would be bringing out appliances to people's cars and lifting, like, fridges and putting them in a car, and, like, all of these heavy, crazy things, and just putting in someone's car. And ultimately, a lot of times, like, it was usually a thankless job, or a lot of times I would end up afterwards being called into somebody's office to say, hey, yeah, did you scratch this person's car? And I'm like, dude, this is like a 800-pound, or this is like a 600-pound item going into a car that obviously did not fit for this item. And so if I broke anything, if I whatever, like, compensate them or return the item, I'm like, this is just like, they brought the wrong car for the wrong item, and reasonably, there's only, bulk of the time, there's only one person for a probably 2 to 3 man job. So do whatever you're going to do. It kind of got to that point to where it's just like, do whatever you need to do. But, like, looking at it, it was just like, I should have been getting paid twice probably what I was actually getting, reasonably. Really honest. So to see Casey Jones taking a sledgehammer and or bat to all of these appliances, toasters, smacking them all away, smashing them, crushing them, and then eventually lifting up this refrigerator is like, yeah, and he's like lifting this refrigerator over his head, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, this is the best part of this whole entire episode. Like, everything just kind of was like really flat beyond that, but a bulk of the time, like, I really liked Casey Jones's, like, gung-ho-ness, even though I would have really liked to have watched this entire episode whenever Casey Jones would talk on mute. Just because, or in my mind, be like having a alternative way. Like, I probably would have read the subtitles. In my mind, I would have been thinking, like, have the Casey Jones guy say all of these lines, that the Casey Jones guy in the movie, or ultimately, like, maybe a Chris Evans Casey Jones, or some other Casey Jones in my mind, not this guy saying this voice, because his voice is off. His voice is awful. But they were trying to go with a very hairy, a Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood kind of approach to a character that didn't need that voice, and was a poor choice. It should have sounded like a Like it should have sounded uh like a Boston guy, or it should have had an accent. It should have had a thick New York accent. It should have had an accent, not Clint Eastwood. So yeah, going into this episode, we ultimately have it to where Krang is constructing this giant robot, and in this Casey Jones episode, this giant robot to go out and I guess slay the world, but ultimately doesn't really slay much. Casey Jones just jumps on top of this robot thing, and there is no way for Casey Jones to take this thing down. There's not, like, what has he got in that frickin' golf bag of his? Like a bomb? Like, does he have a rocket coming out of that thing? Because no, there's no way. Funny enough, eventually Casey Jones like gets out a sledgehammer and just starts sledgehammering the thing. And I'm like, God, this is awesome. But again, I'm just like, this makes no sense. There is no this is like from the Avengers movie. This is like Hawkeye fighting fighting an army of robots with a bow and arrow. It makes no sense. And so Casey Jones sledgehammering a giant robot makes no sense to me, but it's hilarious because it's just like that is the best episode of just like a person that is just stubbornly just like, you know what? No, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up, and then I'm just going to freaking just sledgehammer away on this robot. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this thing down and just sledgehammer it down. But eventually, the robot eventually just grabs him and like handcuffs him to the robot, and so then eventually the turtles just have to go and rescue him because eventually like through this entire thing at first they were letting him go, because ultimately what happens is that we get Casey Jones to just kind of fight random hooligans at first, but then uh, eventually he stumbles upon the turtles, and they undisguise themselves because they were in disguise, and so they tell him, yeah, we're the Ninja Turtles, and he's just like, oh, you're aliens or you're like monsters or something. And so he tries to like at first he tries to fight him, but once they go out of disguise, he like runs away. He like bizarrely breaks a hole into the place that he's at to escape. And I'm just like, I think he was in the sewer at that time, and he was like running and breaking a hole into the sewer to just get out of there, which I thought was so bizarre. Like it's kind of like April in the early episodes, who is just like walking into a wall, and she's like just repeatedly just like, yeah, I'm gonna walk into this wall, and smack, and freaking falls over. Like that is kind of like that at some points where it's just like, this looks really weird. But every once in a while we have to have that random Ash like approaches to and plus that tourist episode, like why is it all of a sudden like water started pouring out of everywhere? That didn't make any sense, but it is what it is. You just kind of figure out how to transition these characters back into this world, and that's what they did. uh but yeah, so reasonably there are some good episodes in here, but a lot of lemons, to be brutally honest, so far. But you can really see for how I talk about these episodes, I had a lot of fun with these bizarre-ish episodes. I had a lot of interesting things to really watch, even though a lot of them were just like ugh kind of episodes. Um, yeah, but other than that, I think There might have been some interesting episodes that maybe I had forgotten about reasonably, because 20 some odd episodes, and I probably mentioned maybe a good, decent half of those. But yeah, whichever the ones were kind of the kind of just interesting enough ones, because a lot of them were just really a lot of duds. To be brutally honest, a lot of duds. So let me know in the comments below if you had watched season 3, and ultimately there was an episode that stuck out to you. Other than that, I probably don't want to make this review way too long. I've kind of been doing like almost 2 hour reviews. Like the Tick season 1 was like a 2 hour review. I'm like, good God, I shouldn't probably make that long. And I'm ultimately trying to and I'm already in an hour into this one, so I think that is probably all that I want to go into. I'm sure there's probably other episodes that people are probably going to pick out. There probably are some episodes that I'm going to be like, oh no, I didn't mention this one, and this one was kind of funny, because after I was going to talk about one episode, I had like a brain fart, and I was like man, I was just gonna as I was talking about one episode, I was thinking about another episode that I was gonna talk about right after that, and then I forgot what that other episode was. So yeah, reasonably, yeah, I think that's all I got in my brain for 23 some odd episodes. So at the end of the day, I think that's all I want to say reasonably. God, I feel like I kind of really didn't feel that I quite talked about enough episodes. But kind of really these episodes were like the greatest hits. Again, wait, if ultimately you want to go into season 3, ultimately just really do some research on the episodes. Some of them are kind of worth watching, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them aren't within 23 episodes. I would maybe probably say a decent half of those, if not less, are probably actually worth watching. Um, Everything else is just kind of uh, just really just heavily duds, really. Um, I also, one thing that I'll kind of bring up before anything, it is really kind of funny to consistently see through every episodes the approaches of different pizzas. Like at some point, I think they had like chili in one pizza. They had ice cream in one pizza. That was kind of funny. I would love to actually try an ice cream pizza. I think that would be weird, because that makes no sense. How would you be able to make an ice cream pizza? You would have to it would have to be like a frozen pizza. Like there's no way that you could you would just have to make a pizza and then throw ice cream on top of it. There's no way you can make an ice cream pizza. That makes no sense to me. Um but yeah, it would just be interesting to see any kind of different I think the best part of these episodes are just to see the weird or wild pizzas through every episode. Regardless of how garbage some of the episodes are, by and large, it's just kind of fun to see the random pizza that shows up per episode, and the random ingredients that they do. I think I remember the early seasons. It was like the funniest one was kind of like cereal pizza. Uh, I think in one episode they had mentioned that they ran out of pepperoni, and ultimately the turtles were scrambling because they're like, we can't have a pizza without pepperoni. So, but the turtles were like, well, yeah, but where are we gonna go and find pizza at 5 a.m.? I'm like, why are they either up at why are they what are they doing at 5 a.m. to go on a pizza craze? And so they were ultimately like trying to find some place that was open at 5 a.m. to try and get like slices of pepperoni. And yeah, so here's one thing I don't understand. Why is it at some point, one, they like it could happen later or it could happen like I would love it to where there would be like Leonardo had some kind of like dream sequences where he would kind of like uh lose at being a leader, but I would love it to have an entire episode of the turtles all having dream sequences where because ultimately it wouldn't actually be an entire episode because it honestly should, but I think it would be better off in dream sequences where you would just have it to where like the turtles would be fighting this villainous pizza. Like, dude, they talk about pizza like all the time. It's all they eat. So you would think at some point, like one episode, there would be like a villain pizza. I think that would be funny. Or like the pizza man would be their villain. I think that would be funny. That would be hilarious that the pizza man or somebody that owns some pizza place would just be their villain. I think that would be hilarious. Because ultimately, like it was kind of funny to in one episode to find out that certain characters had favorited pizza. Because again, like this is all tied to pizza, nothing to pizza. Only I don't know how many times I freaking said pizza in the last uh 10 minutes, but that is probably the best part of the show. But I think other than that, I'm just gonna go again. I apologize if reasonably it's like, yeah, there wasn't a lot of episodes you were talking about here, or there were like a lot, like barely the ones you were talking about didn't go into too detail. There's a lot of garbagey episodes. They're really garbage. Like, I think for me to go into detail about the garbagey episodes, I think like doesn't really save a lot of time. So I think it's more worthwhile to mention the either really crappy episodes or the ones that I had fun watching. I think were really the ones that really the ones that stuck in my mind were really the ones to really focus on and really go into. So, and it was kind of funny that every single time Krang would have some like invention that was already pre-made for something that they weren't expectingly going to need something for. And then eventually Shredder was like, "Hey, how is it that you have this device already prepared?" And Krang would look right into the TV screen and is like, "It's just to drive the story." Like, if anything, funnily in this season, there is a lot more fourth wall breaking than any other time to where like two turtles would say the same line and another turtle would look at the camera and just be like, yeah, it sounds like there's an echo here. Weird, right? Like talking right to the camera. Like I thought that was actually funny how many numerous times ever like all the turtles would or anybody would just come in and just fourth wall break in these episodes. I thought that was much more fun than anything else to just consistently see like Family Guy would tend to do it to at some points in time to say like, yeah, like we don't know how to end this episode, so this is just what we do now. Or like ultimately Peter at some point would just be like, yeah, this entire episode is just going to be about Meg. Here's the remote. I wouldn't blame you. like so yeah, like episodes like that where they had fourth wall breaking and like Family Guy, like in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's fun to see fourth wall breaking as well, because ultimately you're just assuming that every episode is just going to be like, yeah, here's the turtles fighting this thing and robotically phoned in all the time, but once you see the fourth wall breaking, it's like, okay, that's not the phoned in part. That's them just having fun through every episode and heckling the crap about their own either mistakes or something like that. It would kind of even be funny at some points to mention the technical issues that they kind of would do through certain episodes. There'd be some times where ultimately you would see, like, I think there was one episode where I saw Shredder where I'm like, Shredder does not quite have the right skin tone. And then all of a sudden, like, you would see him kind of shift into a different scene, and then he would have the right skin tone on. But ultimately, before that, I'm like, man, Shredder's looking a little pale, a little pale this episode, or a little bit different. Um, but yeah, so some technical things that I think they could have had fun with. There was also some just um, like, I think when like certain characters were doing certain voices, it would have been funny if they would have just kind of made fun of that to realize like, hey, yeah, we can only have these characters do these number of episodes. So yeah, Raph is gonna have a cold this week or something like that. It would be funny to just throw those jokes in because why not? But at the end of the day, I think that's all I'm going to say about this review. Um, Ultimately, again, I do apologize for not thoroughly going into every episode. I think there's some reviews where I thoroughly go into a lot of stuff. This one was just kind of like, let's have fun with it. So at the end of the day, I hope you guys had fun. I had fun reviewing this after watching it. And finally, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go back into reviewing some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show episodes and seasons and whatever, and I hope everybody is fine with that. And so, yeah, I hope everybody likes this review. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.